Here is something they didn't put in the headlines. On November 12, 2025, less than 4 months before Mike B. Brown was shot and killed, the Detroit Downtown Development Authority voted unanimously to approve $75 million in public funding to redevelop the land surrounding the Renaissance Center, a $1.6 billion project backed by Dan Gilbert's Bedrock and General Motors, with plans to demolish towers, raise the podium, and build a brand new pedestrian promenade running straight down Jefferson Avenue to the riverfront. Jefferson Avenue, the same street where Mike B. ran his Crab Sports Bar, right across from the Renaissance Center, right in the heart of what developers were calling, and I want you to hold this phrase, a once-in-a-generation transformation. Mike B. Brown was killed on February 28, 2026. GM had moved out of the Renaissance Center in January 2026, 1 month before he died. The city was already changing around him. The machines weren't rolling yet, but the money had already moved. The decisions had already been made. The corridor where he built his business was about to become the most valuable real estate in Detroit's modern history.
Yo, Club Status got Dollar Lamb Chop today. Come through about 7 o'clock. I'm gonna have them on the grill. Dollar Lamb Chop. We got $5 Hennessy, $5 Grey Goose, $5 mixed drink. We got it.
And he was there with his name on the door, refusing to go anywhere. 3 people were shot outside Suite 100 Lounge on Schaefer Highway at 4:30 in the morning. 2 survived. Mike B. didn't. His body was found alone, across the street from the other victims. No suspect has been named. No arrest has been made. And the silence from the investigation, 2 full weeks in, is the kind of silence that asks its own questions. Today on Mystora Crimes, we are going to follow the money. We are going to follow the land. We're going to lay out every verified fact and every unverified question. And we are going to be honest about the difference between the two, because this case deserves that. Mike B.'s family deserves that. Some of what you're about to hear is confirmed by multiple news sources. Some of it is community-level information that has not been independently verified. And we will tell you clearly every single time which is which. Your job is to think, to connect, to ask the questions that nobody in the official record is asking yet. That's what we do here. If you're new to Mystora Crimes, welcome. This channel exists for exactly this. The cases where a headline tells you someone died, and the story underneath tells you why it might matter to the wrong people that they were still alive. Hit subscribe. Click the bell. And before we go any further, if Mike B.'s story moves you, leave a comment and let his name be seen. Because the algorithm buries what we don't amplify, and we are not going to let this man be buried twice. Let's get into it. To understand the new angle on this case, you have to understand something about Detroit that the national news never quite captures. Detroit is a city that was written off. For decades, the story was decline, empty buildings, shrinking population, bankruptcy. And then, slowly the story changed. Money started coming back downtown. Developers started buying. Cranes came back to the skyline. And a very specific question emerged that every Detroiter felt in their chest. Who is this new Detroit actually for? That question is not abstract. It plays out block by block, address by address, and who owns what and who gets pushed out when the money arrives. Mike B. Brown understood that question better than most. He was a Southfield Lathrop graduate who had built his reputation from the ground up. 20 years as a party promoter, hosting his hip-hop showcase Murder the Mic for over 2 decades, making himself an institution in Detroit's nightlife world. And then in 2020, during a pandemic that was shutting everyone down, he opened Sloppy Chops on West McNichols, a real steakhouse with ribeyes and tomahawks and a lamb chop special that people drove across the city for. A year later, in 2021, he made the move that everyone who knows Detroit's geography will understand immediately. He opened Sloppy Crab on East Jefferson Avenue, near the Renaissance Center, later renamed the Crab Sports Bar, right there on one of the most contested corridors in a city that was being quietly bought, repositioned, and reshaped by billionaire money. A journalist who interviewed him recalled calling him more than 20 times to secure a sit-down. His response when she finally got him? He didn't care about press. He cared about building. He told her, "I've learned to take things slow and really build the Sloppy brand until we are operating at perfection." He had plans to expand Sloppy Chops and Sloppy Crab to Atlanta, Houston, and Miami. He was planning a second Jefferson Avenue location. He was deepening his footprint on that corridor, not stepping back from it. Now here's where the verified facts become genuinely startling. In November 2024, Dan Gilbert's Bedrock and General Motors announced a $1.6 billion plan to redevelop the Renaissance Center and its surrounding riverfront. The plan called for demolishing 2 of the 4 main office towers, raising a massive concrete podium that had walled off the complex from the street for 50 years, and building a brand new pedestrian promenade running directly along Jefferson Avenue to connect downtown to the riverfront. By November 2025, the Detroit Downtown Development Authority voted unanimously to approve $75 million in public reimbursements to fund that infrastructure, specifically including new plazas, pedestrian paths, and direct access along Jefferson Avenue. Bedrock's incoming CO described it plainly. The next chapter is the riverfront axis. In January 2026, 1 month before Mike B. was killed, General Motors moved its global headquarters out of the Renaissance Center and into Bedrock's New Hudson's Detroit building. The building across the street from Mike B.'s restaurant was now empty. The $1.6 billion clock was ticking. And somewhere in that corridor, there was a black entrepreneur with his name on a property that sat squarely in the path of the most transformative development project Detroit had seen in a generation. One community member who commented on an early report about the case put it simply: owning that spot on Jefferson across from the Renaissance was a major monopoly move. And they were not wrong. In a city where land along a $1.6 billion development corridor becomes worth multiples of what was worth before, who controls that land matters enormously. Who gets bought out, who holds on, and who ends up owning the address after someone dies. All of those questions are questions that investigators in any serious homicide would be asking right now. We are asking them too. And we are just getting started. Let's talk about what is confirmed versus what is circulating. Because on this case, the community is talking, and what they're saying deserves to be addressed directly and carefully. What is confirmed: Mike B. Brown is dead. No suspect has been named publicly. No arrest has been made. 2 other people were shot at the scene, survived, have not been publicly identified, and have not, at least not on the record, come forward as witnesses. The bar where the shooting occurred was reportedly operating past Michigan's 2:30 a.m. legal cutoff for alcohol service. A neighbor described the venue as having shifted toward a younger, more volatile crowd in recent times. The DPD has publicly confirmed they need the community's help, that witnesses exist and are not talking. What is not confirmed but is being raised by people who knew Mike B. The first claim is that he was scheduled to testify in an upcoming legal case. We searched every public court record and news database available and found zero confirmation of this anywhere. That does not mean it is false. Homicide investigations involving potential witnesses are frequently kept out of public record precisely because of witness safety concerns. But we cannot state this as fact. What we can say is this: if it is true, it changes the entire frame of this case, and it is exactly the kind of detail that Detroit police homicide will be treating as priority 1 right now. The second claim circulating in the community is that someone approached Mike B. about selling his Jefferson Avenue property, and that he refused. Again, there is no public record confirming this. Real estate pressure campaigns between private parties almost never appear in public unless they escalate to litigation. But here is what is documentably, verifiably true. The property he owned sat inside a development corridor where $1.6 billion was actively being deployed. The pedestrian promenade that Bedrock and the DDA funded is specifically described as running along Jefferson Avenue. The master plans of that area involve reshaping the commercial landscape from the Renaissance Center outward, and longtime residents of the East Jefferson corridor have been on record for years saying, in their own words, "We do not want Jefferson Chalmers to go the way of Midtown neighborhoods, where so many longtime residents have been displaced as a result of the way economic development has reshaped those neighborhoods." Displacement is not always violent. Usually it isn't. Usually it's financial pressure, offers, tax changes, zoning shifts that make it harder to hold on. But the context, a black business owner with a prime address in a corridor about to be worth dramatically more, refusing to yield, building instead of retreating, that context is real, whether or not anyone directly pressured him to sell. There is also the detail that his body was found across the street from the other two victims. Two people shot in front of the bar. Mike B., found alone across the street. That is not a minor geographical note. That is a question about sequencing, about where the shooter was standing, about the direction of movement, about whether Mike B. was already separated from the group or whether he tried to run and didn't make it. Police have not addressed this publicly. They haven't addressed much publicly. And when a community activist commented, "And no one is suspect," that frustration is not paranoia. That is pattern recognition from people who have watched cases like this fade into silence before. One more detail that the community flagged: the reference to someone known as AZ being active in that area for years. We cannot verify who or what this refers to. We are not going to speculate. But the underlying point that Detroit's nightlife and entertainment corridors have established territorial presences, and that when someone builds away Mike B., was building frictions and developed that never make it onto social media. That underlying point is a legitimate investigative question, not an accusation. A question. I want to step back from the facts for a moment and talk about something that true crime often misses: the psychology of the victim's trajectory, and what it tells us about the environment they were operating in. Mike B. Brown was 52 years old. He had 5 children. His brother Myron, who lost his father when he was 1 year old and Mike B. was 5, described him as the man who taught him basketball, stayed on him about his grades, and was a father figure in every sense. My brother took care of a lot of people. Myron said publicly, his voice breaking. He provided a lot of jobs. Now I just ask that you guys help him out this one time and speak up. Think about what kind of man produces that kind of eulogy from a younger sibling. Think about what it means to be the 5-year-old who steps into a father role because there is no other option. Mike B. didn't just build restaurants. He built from a specific kind of hunger, the kind that comes from growing up understanding that nobody is coming to save you, so you build a thing yourself. And here is the psychological dimension that matters for this case. People who build from that place do not walk away from what they've built. They do not sell when pressure comes. They dig in. They expand. They double down. When you have fought for every brick of something, you don't hand it to someone because they make you an offer. You hold it tighter. That is who Mike B. was. A builder who was still building at 52. A man who opened his first restaurant during a pandemic, launched his second one on the most strategically important street in a redeveloping city, and was planning to take the whole brand national. That is not a man who is going to be bought out quietly. That is not a man who is going to be moved. And here's a hard truth that true crime forces us to confront. Sometimes the very qualities that make someone a builder, the refusal to yield, the deep roots, the visibility, are the same qualities that make them dangerous to people who want what they have. I am not saying that is what happened here. What I am saying is that investigators have a responsibility to look at Mike B.'s full world. Not just who was at Suite 100 on a Saturday morning, but who had reasons to want his footprint in that corridor to disappear. Who benefits from the property on East Jefferson becoming available. Who was watching his expansion plans and calculating what they meant. Who in Detroit's entertainment world felt that his 30 years of relationship building had made him too powerful in spaces they wanted to control. These are not conspiracy theories. In homicide investigation, these are standard questions. They are called motive analysis. And the fact that no public answer has emerged 2 weeks after his killing either means investigators are close to something they're not ready to announce, or means those questions aren't being asked loudly enough. His funeral was held on March 13th at Triumph Church's North Campus in Southfield. His family gathered a week before at Sloppy Chops to release balloons. They are doing what grieving families do, honoring a man, holding each other, trying to make sense of something that doesn't make sense. And somewhere in this city, the person or people who pulled the trigger are still walking around. Let me tell you the things I know are true, the things I believe are worth investigating, and the things that only you, the people watching this, the people who knew Mike B., the people in Detroit who saw something that night, can answer. What I know is true. A $1.6 billion development project was formally approved and funded 3 months before Mike B. was killed. His restaurant sat directly on the Jefferson Avenue corridor that is the centerpiece of that project. GM vacated the building across the street from his business 1 month before he died. His body was found across the street from the other 2 victims, with no public explanation for that separation. No suspect has been identified. 2 survivors of the same shooting have not been publicly named. The bar was reportedly operating past legal hours. The city moved swiftly to regulate the venue, and more slowly, it seems, to name anyone responsible for the death. What I believe investigators should be asking publicly: was Mike B. involved in any active or upcoming legal proceedings as a witness, as a party, in any capacity? Were there any offers made on his Jefferson Avenue property in the months before his death? Who are the 2 surviving victims, and what do they know? What does the surveillance footage from that corridor, one of the most camera-dense areas in Detroit, actually show? And who, in Detroit's nightlife and real estate world, had the most to gain from his address becoming available? What only the community can answer. The comment that started this new angle on the case came from someone who knew him, who said that owning that spot across from the Renaissance was a major monopoly move, who noted that no suspect had emerged, who flagged territorial activity in that area that has never been publicly explained. That person and others like them know things, maybe small things, maybe connections that seem unrelated, maybe a name they heard once in passing that they've been sitting on because they don't know if it's safe to say it. Crime Stoppers Dan Bardino stated clearly, in 6 years and 42,000 anonymous tips, not one tipster has ever been identified. That number, 1-800-SPEAK, UP, exists precisely for moments like this. For when you know something but don't know if you're safe, you are. Use it. And here's what I want to leave you with. The question that I think sits at the heart of this entire case, and that I genuinely do not have the answer to. In a city where a billion-dollar transformation is underway along a corridor where a black entrepreneur had planted his flag, who benefits most from his absence? Is this case about a Saturday night that went wrong for random reasons? Is it about territory in Detroit's nightlife world? Is it about someone who knew too much about something? Is it about land? Is it about all of those things at once, tangled together in ways that investigators may not have fully mapped yet? Detroit has seen this before, not always with violence, but with a quiet erasure of black economic presence from neighborhoods that suddenly become desirable. The difference here is that this erasure was loud. 3 people shot, 1 dead, no suspect, 2 weeks of silence. Mike B. built something, he refused to yield, and now his family is burying him today, on March 13th, 2026, while machines that will transform the corridor he chose to occupy are warming up somewhere just down the street. That is the story. That is the question. And it deserves an answer. Drop your theory in the comments. All of them. Tell me what you see that I might have missed. Tell me if you're from Detroit and this hits different for you. Tell me what questions you think need to be answered first. And if you're not subscribed to Mystora Crimes yet, do it right now, because part 2 of this case is coming, and you do not want to be the last one to find out what we find next. For Mike B., for his family, for Detroit, 1-800-SPEAK. UP. Anonymous. Always.